Getting in some initial details of the investigation of the plane that crashed, the air ambulance that crashed after takeoff from Ranchi. The crash itself was in Latehar, Palamu, and we're getting in more details of the initial investigation that was conducted by the AAIB, the team which was in Jharkhand. Yesterday, we've picked up some details, the initial report with us right now. And the initial report suggests that there was no black box found, there was no cockpit voice recorder, there was no flight data recorder. But interestingly, the report also goes on to immediately give two reasons or two rules to say why it did not have a black box or a data flight recorder. It cites how there was a rule that said that the first certificate of airworthiness for the aircraft was issued in 1987 prior to 1st Jan 2016. But they then talk about the applicability date for requirements. They claim that as far as these planes are concerned, planes which are less than 5,700 kilograms, the maximum takeoff weight, they claim for flights which are less than that, there is no requirement. This report also says the first certificate of airworthiness for the aircraft was issued in 1987 prior to 1st January 2016, which is the applicability date for the CVR requirements, and prior to 1st January 1990. Accordingly, there was no mandatory, they claim there was no mandatory regulatory requirement for installation of a cockpit voice recorder or a flight data recorder on this aircraft at the time of its original certification. So this is a new thing that we are hearing now, that there was no black box. But what I found interesting, Harsha, is that this report goes into detail of why the plane did not need to have a flight recorder or a black box. So, how does it add up?
Niranjan, one thing, because the weight of the aircraft was less, and in the year 1987, there was no requirement, there was no accessibility, data for the CVR requirement or the FDR requirement for the aircraft which are lesser than 5,700 kg, and therefore this is very old aircraft, Niranjan. This is 1987 aircraft. The aircraft is 25 to 30 years old, and but the larger question here is, Niranjan, it had CVR, it didn't have CVR or didn't have FDR. The bigger question is, after Learjet 45 crash, the DGCA ordered audit of all the helicopter charter company which are providing domestic services, ambulance services to the passengers, to the influential people. There has to supposed to be an audit, and there was no audit of this particular company. The larger question is, if there was an audit, then they didn't find out that this particular plane didn't have CVR and FDR, and now it's a requirement. Now it's the mandatory requirement in the aviation sector that the charters, the planes, the ambulances, they need to have CVR and FDR. If this plane was old, then also where is the audit report? Did the audit report already tell the regulatory body that this particular aircraft is not having CVR and FDR? And Niranjan, now when the CVR, FDR black box is not there at the accident spot, which the AIB didn't get it because it was not in the plane, it will be very difficult for the investigators to investigate in the Jharkhand plane crash. They will have to depend on the flight weather radar. They will have to depend on the audios of the eyewitness, what they saw. They will have to also depend on the metals and the debris distribution which they found at the accident spot, like the nose, where exactly was the tail, body and nose of the aircraft. Like yesterday we were already explaining to our viewers that the engine was found 200 meters away. So on all these possibility and aspects, now AIB will have to investigate and will be finding out what were the reasons of the crash, what was the communication between ATC and the pilot. Only that will exactly tell to our viewers and to everyone why exactly and how the control was lost. It was the weather deviation, the path which the pilot in command took, the right path, 40 nautical miles near Varanasi. Was that a weather very critical? It was weather condition area. All this will be communicated only through a communication between ATC and the pilot in command. But No black box. No black box, no finding what happened inside the aircraft will come out to be known by the investigators, because there's no black box, there's no CVR, there's no FDR. That means what happened inside the aircraft, what is the communication between Mr. Bhagat and Mr. Singh, the pilot and pilot in command, that will never be known to anyone exactly what transpired for, the reasons behind the crash. Back to you.